My people, we're ready to mount up like an eagle. Stand and fight against evil. A system rigged and deceitful.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, my name is True Pettigrew, and I am your guest host for the King Talks podcast for this month, as we are doing a special Black History Month podcast called I Am King, Our Men and Our Story. And we'll be sharing different stories from men of King as it relates to Black History Month. And I'm excited for the opportunity to guest host this series. I also happen to be the president of our Raleigh chapter for King, and I'm also the founder and chief community bridge builder for True Access, which is an inspiration and empowerment consultancy that I founded in an effort to help people to bridge gaps across divides, whether those be racial divides, generational divides, cultural divides, or relational divides of any kind. And it truly is an honor and a privilege to be on this call today, chopping it up with one of my King brothers out of NY. One of my King brothers out of NY, my man Cliff Skeene. So Cliff, thank you for joining me today, man. I've heard a lot about you. I know some of your story, but I'm eager to learn more about you and more about your story. So if you don't mind, man, just talk a little bit about who you are, and why don't you just tell us, a brief introduction, who you are, where you live, what King chapter you're a part of. Let's just start off with a quick intro like that.
All right, no problem. Thank you for having me. My name is Cliff Skeene. I'm originally from Jamaica. I currently live in Brooklyn, New York. I'm a part of the King New York chapter. I joined King last year, and it's just been an amazing journey for me. King has been a blessing to my life. It's something that I needed, that I've been looking for a while. So it was, a great blessing when I found out about King and had an opportunity to be a part of this amazing movement.
How'd you hear about King? How'd you first hear about King?
Well, I first heard about King through the New York chapter president, Donald. We came across his music. We were trying to do a youth outreach for the church that I was a part of at the time. So we reached out to him, and we did a youth outreach in the Bronx. But in the song I Am King,
right.
He said, I brought the kings with me. It's a movement.
I brought the kings with me on this one. It's a movement. Yeah. I had it.
So, I was, when I saw him, I asked him, what do you mean it's a movement? What is this movement? What it's all about? And I found out about King from him. And like I said, this is something I was looking for, so I was eager to sign up.
Excellent. A shout out to Donald, aka Reflect I Am King, head of our New York chapter. Shout out to my man Donald, dope MC right there. No, that's good. Sir. That's good. So tell us a little bit about who you are. Like I said, I heard a lot about you and your story. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you became to be the man that you are today? A lot of things shape us all throughout our life's journey, right? A lot of our experiences as a child, and then as we matriculate through life and we develop different relationships, we have different life experiences, some adverse experiences, some amazing experiences, but it all shapes the person that we become. And so as we are doing this series focusing on Black History Month, I want to understand what your life was like, what really shaped the man that you are, and if and how your race, as matriculating life as a black man and here in America, what things impacted or influenced you, and was your race, your heritage, your culture one of those things or some of those things that you think shaped who you are today?
Definitely. Growing up in Jamaica, it was like I had one of the influences that I had was my grandparents who were they brought that strong Christian influence. So I always had that Christian background. Um, Building on that and moving to America, that continued.
When did you? How old were you when you moved to America?
Well, I was 18 years old when I moved to America. I had already finished high school, so I was in between that gap of trying to figure out my next move. You know, trying to learn pretty much a new culture.
Do you think your race played more of a role in shaping your identity when you were, and you said Jamaica?
Yeah, like
When you were in Jamaica, or was it more of something that you felt impacted you when you were here in the United States? Because I'm thinking in Jamaica, mostly everybody looks like you in Jamaica, right?
exactly. So it wasn't it didn't play a big part in Jamaica, but it definitely impacted me when I moved to America. It was a shock to know. Like in Jamaica, of course there are prejudices, but I've never experienced outright racism because of the color of my skin. And then to experience that in America, that was a shock. That was something different. That's something I had to learn to deal with. That's something had to learn to understand. I think my race had played a big part in everything that I went through. I believe, had I not been black, like my story, I would have been telling a different story. The What I went through with the criminal justice system, had I been, say, white, my story would have ended differently, I believe.
Do you mind sharing what it is that you went through with the criminal justice system? Exactly what happened?
Okay, so in 2008, I was charged with conspiracy to commit robbery. This was I was charged along with two other individuals. I had went into a CVS store. We were on our way back from somewhere. I had went into a CVS store, and after I went in, I came back out. They decided they need to go in there. They ended up robbing the CVS store. I drove away from the after robbery. I was driving the car, so when they got back out, I drove away. So I was charged with conspiracy to robbery. I did not know that they were going to rob this store. I only found out after they came out. I could have, said no, I'm not driving, but I did drive away.
And this was after this was after they hopped in the car. Then you drove off with them.
Right. So I was charged with conspiracy to commit robbery. When I got arrested, I was in the county jail for about 3 years and 7 months trying to fight my case. I couldn't bail out because I was a permanent resident and not a American citizen. So
wow.
I had immigration detainer placed on me. So when that detainer was placed on me, there's no bail, or even if there was a bail, but even if I had bailed out, I wasn't going home. I was going to an immigration detention center. So I was there for approximately 3 years and 7 months trying to fight my case. I eventually got frustrated and decided to plead out to second-degree robbery, which would give me a lesser sentence than first-degree conspiracy to robbery. I would
So
I
you were fighting. You were fighting it initially.
Yes, I was. I was. After I pled guilty to second-degree robbery, I was sentenced to 7 years. This is in New Jersey. I was sentenced to 7 years under the No Early Release Act, which means I would have to serve 85% of my time and then do 5 years mandatory parole after that.
Wow.
So I
And this is after
doing,
you had already. But this is after you had already been in for 3 years and 7 months.
right. However, they did count that 3 years and 7 months towards that 7 years. So
Okay, got you.
I ended up doing a total of 5 years, 11 months, and 11 days.
Got it.
So after I served my time in prison, I was sent to an immigration detention center because I had an immigration detainer, and their thing is, once you commit a crime and you're a permanent resident, they snatch that. So it was a whole trial all over again. I had to go to immigration court, and there was a whole trial. Luckily, my argument in immigration was that I have not been to Jamaica in years. I'm estranged from there. I know no one there. I have no family there. So if I go back there, I'll be a target. Luckily, the judge agreed with me and decided that I could stay, that I wouldn't be deported. However, I wasn't getting my permanent residency back. I could just stay. I didn't have a status. I had nothing.
So you had no status. You weren't a permanent resident. You weren't a citizen. You had no status.
I had no status.
Is that a thing? Does that even exist? Are there other? So help me understand. Are there other people out there that are living like that in this country with absolutely no status, that are undefined?
Yeah. I'm allowed, I'm allowed to apply for a work permit, which I have to renew on a yearly basis, but I pretty much have no status.
Even today, that's true for you today. No status.
No status.
How does that impact your life from a benefit standpoint that the average person may be able to have access to? Because when you're filling out forms for applications for jobs or for healthcare or for any other types of benefits, I don't like when you fill out your forms for a loan. Like, how does that work?
See, yeah, that's the thing. You just have to hit that non-U.S. citizen. Well, it's really difficult. My experience after immigration, after I was released, it was a nightmare. Seeing that I had no status, they also took everything. They took my permanent resident card. They took my passport, so I had no ID. I went back to them and I was like, I need an ID. I can't do anything without an ID, and this is the only identification that I have, my passport, because you guys took everything else. They were like, we can't give you your passport. We can't give you your passport back. Go figure it out. They eventually gave me a copy. They photocopied the front of my passport where my picture is, and that's what they gave to me. I was like, nobody's gonna accept a photocopy of my passport as an ID.
Yeah, no kidding.
They also gave me a it was a form. I also had to report to immigration every 6 months, and then every year. To report, they gave me it was simply a piece of paper with instructions, and they printed a picture of me and taped it to that. And that was the only form of ID that I had, and nobody really accepted that. What I did for an ID was I eventually volunteered at a nursing home, and I got a work ID from there, which I brought to which I used to help get a municipal ID in New York City. That's how I got an ID, and even the municipal ID, it wasn't accepted everywhere, so I was still running into problems. I tried to file for a work permit, ran into roadblocks after roadblock. I eventually got frustrated, and I reached out to the Legal Aid Society, and they were able to help me to get a work permit. After getting a work permit, it was easier for me to get a driver's license, and sign up for benefits like Medicaid. Before I got arrested, I was in a car accident where I shattered my ankle, and so I needed constant medical care. That was a nightmare.
I can only imagine, because you don't have status or any ID, right? At that point.
Exactly. So it was, to manage the pain. For a while, I was just using over-the-counter medication, which wasn't really helping. Until I could, navigate through all of that to get health care.
Did you eventually get the health care you needed?
Yeah, I eventually got the health care that I needed. I eventually got on Medicaid because I wasn't working. With a work permit, that luckily was one of the immigrant status that was able to get Medicaid.
Gotcha. What about a driver's license? Could you even get a driver's license?
Yeah, I was able to get a driver's license. However, my driver's license, on it says temporary status, and it shows when that temporary status expires, which is the date that the work permit expires. The work permit only lasts for a year, so every year I have to renew it, and it's about $500 to do it. And when I renew it and they send me a new one, I have to take that to the DMV to update my driver's license, my temporary status on my driver's license, because if I don't do that, if I get pulled over by a cop, I could get a ticket for having a driver's license with an outdated status on it.
Right. Man, so just hat off to you, man. Shout out to you for the resilience that you've shown and being able to navigate all of these different challenges that you've been faced with. Because I know it could not have been easy. Now, earlier in the conversation, when I asked the question, do you think your race played a role in how you've had to navigate your life here in the U.S., and you said yes. What do you say to those people who say, nah, man, I'm not buying it? That would have happened. The same thing would have happened to anybody, no matter their race, because you were a party to this crime, no matter what your race, no matter what your culture, no matter what your background. The same thing would have happened to anybody. What do you say to people who would say something like that to you?
Had I been white, the judge probably would have seen himself in me or in my story, and my sentence wouldn't have been as harsh if I was convicted at all. So, for somebody to say that my race, it could have happened to anybody, yeah, probably, but it happens to black people or brown people more than it happens to any other race.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think that we represent such a higher population of the prison complex? Why do you think blacks and black men in particular are incarcerated and charged with more time or receive harsher charges for same crimes as the data shows, as the data suggests? Why do you think here in America? Why do you think that is the case?
I think that the laws and policies that govern states and this country is geared towards criminalizing black and brown people. I believe that this is a continued form of slavery. I believe that the laws are I'm sorry.
No, take your time. Well, I'll tell you what, let me ask you this then. What do you think you're part of a movement, I'm part of a movement, we're part of K.I.N.G movement, which we are here to inspire and empower men to live out their full God-given potential in every realm of life, to be the best we can be. What are some things you think we could be doing or should be doing to assure that the types of things that happen to you don't happen to other young brothers? What are some things we could be doing or should be doing?
Mentorship in our communities, filling in where there is a need, where there is a need for strong, positive role models, pushing education, just making our youth aware of how important and powerful education is. Because a lot of the times I find that the younger kids, they don't place that value on education. They don't think it's that important. They think it's a waste of time when statistics show that if you have a college education, you are going to get a better job.
Right.
So mentorship and education, I think, two of the biggest things that we should be pushing that would make a difference.
Okay. Now, I like that. Mentorship and education are critical, and I would tend to agree with you. And even helping our young men to hone and develop leadership skills is something that I kind of heard in your response as well. What role or where do you believe faith plays a part in this? If you believe faith plays a role in ensuring that we help our young brothers avoid the pitfalls of society, so to speak, what role, if any, do you believe faith plays in that?
Faith plays a very big role in this. The faith instills in us certain values, certain discipline that helps us to be better men. So faith plays a very big role in this, and that's another thing that we should be encouraging in our youth.
Now, what about you in your situation? What role did your faith play in your situation? Did it help at all when you were incarcerated for those 5+ years? Did you have to lean on your faith at all? And if so, how did it help get you through?
My faith was the only thing that got me through that time. I realized earlier on that the greatest battle that I had, the greatest challenge that I had to face while incarcerated was preserving the peace and tranquility of my sanity. Faith was, like I said, was the only thing that got me through. So from the jump, I was trying to get closer to God, like trying to find God in this situation, because I know that this was the only thing that was gonna bring me through. And what's funny, when I was incarcerated, when I was locked up in the jail, I wasn't allowed to go to church. Yes, we'd have ministers come around every now and again, but I was not allowed to go to church service because I was I walked with a cane, so I was housed in a medical unit, and I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. When I was transferred to prison, the same thing, because I was using a cane. I wasn't allowed to go to any of the I wasn't allowed to participate in any of the educational opportunities that they had. The only place I could go to was the library and church. So I went to every available church service that I could go to, every event that the church had at the prison. Not only because I wanted to, but because I know that this was the only thing that was sustaining me throughout my time there.
Man, so your faith was the foundational element that really got you through. I mean, that
Yes,
helped sustain you during that time. Were you able to share your faith with other brothers while you were in prison?
Definitely. On my housing block, everybody knew that knew who I was because of my faith. Where I was when I was moved to prison, I was housed at Garden State Youth Correctional Facility. It's supposed to house people from ages 18 to about 25, 26. However, when I went there, I was 29 years old. They told me that because this is my first time in prison, this is where I have to be at first, and then I would eventually be transferred. When I went there, I had like a little over 2 years left to do on my sentence. They eventually just kept me there for those 2+ years, and I had an opportunity to share my faith with a lot of the brothers that was on my housing block. These were young men who were there not because they were bad or horrible individuals. These were just individuals who didn't have that guidance, that mentorship, somebody to look up to show them what it means to be a man.
Right.
They got, their idea of being a man was what they saw on TV, was what they saw in rap videos. That's what they got their idea of manhood from. So I was able to share my faith with a lot of the young brothers who I came across on my housing unit.
Man, so as I listen to you talk, and I just think about a lot of the misguided views and perceptions of what manhood means, and how we succeed in life, particularly through the lens of how we define manhood. And so much of it is based on material things and the world's view, and accumulating things in life. So having gone through the experiences that you've gone through, how would you help another young man define success? And I know that can be relative, but I think so many of our young men define success by the amount of money they have in the bank. And there's nothing wrong with achieving wealth, and I encourage all of us to do our best to achieve generational wealth, but defining success by the amount of cars that's in the driveway, the the amount of clothes that you have in your closet, the amount of watches you have, the amount of shoes that you have, the amount of women that you've been with, and all of these other things that the world tells us is successful. So how would you define success?
For me, success is the ability to feed, clothe, and shelter yourself and your family on a daily basis. It's as simple as that for me.
Got you. Yeah, man, and I commend you for living a life of success, and not giving up, because having gone through a lot of things that you've gone through, I'm sure it would be easy to just give up and just turn away from your faith, because it's that whole why is this happening to me mentality. But I love your story, man, and it's a story of sustaining faith and putting your trust in God regardless of the situation or the circumstance, knowing that that where your sustenance comes from, and where your healing and your comes from, and where your provision, like it sounds like you never turned away from God, and you never gave up on that regardless of the situation or the circumstance. Talk to me a little bit about how you were, because that's not easy. I mean, we say it all the time, right? Just keep the faith, like God will provide. Yeah, and I think intuitively we know that, but when things aren't going your way, it's easier said than done. That's a hard thing to do when things aren't going your way.
Yeah.
How'd you maintain, man? Were there other people that you looked to that poured into you? Because I love that you were pouring into others, but was there someone that was pouring into you, or you just were in the Word? Like, how did you, as it says, like, how did you not grow weary and continue to, feed the good, so to speak?
Well, I had my aunt who was continually pouring into me. She was always writing, encouraging me to stay in the Word, keep on praying, and at first I had nothing to read but my Bible, so that was one of the things that kept me going. There was a point when I was in the jail fighting my case. I had a Muslim roommate, and through our conversations, he got me, like, the questions that he would ask me, like, really challenged me to search for answers about my faith in the Bible, because he was trying to convert me. He was trying to tell me that the only reason that I'm Christian is because my family was Christian. I had to say, no, hold on a minute. No, this is not the reason why I'm Christian. I'm Christian because I have had an encounter, an intimate encounter with God. This is why I'm Christian. So don't, and I had to learn how to defend my faith. And I thank God that I came across that brother, because before I wouldn't be able to, but by him challenging me and me searching for answers, I was able to learn to defend my faith. Also, there was I came across a correspondence Bible course while I was in the jail that I started doing. That was also a big help in sustaining my faith.
That's powerful in so many ways, man, because what I hear from that is the distinction between lessons and tests, and how they are the two are linked, but there's still a distinction between the two. And when I hear you say, I learned how to defend my faith, so I think God teaches us lessons that can feel like a test at times, right? But that's really helping you to learn the lesson. And if we don't learn it, he'll continue to teach us that lesson until we learn it, because he knows we'll need to have learned the lesson in order to pass the test. And
Right.
you were tested, but you passed those tests because you were put in a position to be required to learn the lessons. And I love that God operates that way at times in our lives, is forcing us to learn, putting us in positions to learn these lessons, because he knows the test is coming. And
Right.
just like being in school, if you don't learn the lesson, when the test comes, you're not going to do well.
That's
But
right.
you seem to have passed the test with flying colors, brother. And man, I mean, this is fascinating stuff, and I thank you for your willingness to be transparent with sharing your story. I think it's going to bless so many lives and help so many other brothers that hear your story. So, what are the things that, when you talk about mentorship, and we talked about guidance and direction, and you're part of the New York King movement chapter, what are the things that you would say to someone who was in a situation like yours? And it sounds like it's that mentorship and that guidance, and even as I listen to you talk about your aunt that was giving you that encouragement, and these are some of the things that King offers as a movement. But not every brother is aware of King that was in your situation, right? And you weren't aware of King when you first got out. And one of the things that we often hear about that's a challenge for people that are transitioning back into society, the re-entry, is how tough it is, because once you have that record, you can't get a job, you can't get housing, you can't get a party. Like, it's so many things that are against you. Now, it would be dope if King was just waiting for you when you walked out of those prison gates, right? And you had the support and the guidance and the mentorship that you needed. But that's not the reality.
Right.
What do we need to do as a society? Not just King specific, but maybe there's something King can do. What do we need to do as a society, from your experience, to really help those that are seeking to responsibly re-enter society? What are some of the biggest challenges that you faced, and what are some things you think we need to do for re-entry reform?
One of the things that we need to do as a society is we have to meet people where they are. I mean, on a spiritual level, on all levels, But let's take King for example. Most of the time, one of the things that was frustrating to me when I did have access to like church services, the volunteers that came in, they came in with a preset gospel of what it is that they thought we needed, and a lot of times that did not work, because they thought they were bringing God to the prison. No, God is already there. When I have never experienced God or the Holy Spirit as I have experienced it in prison to date. So, the idea that they're bringing God to the prison, or they're bringing Jesus to the convicts, that's not where it's at. We have to first learn, who we're going to, finding out what their needs are, where they're at, and try to meet them there. Same thing for re-entering residents. Try to meet them where they're at. Find out what their needs are, and try to meet those needs. Help them to navigate through this whole system of not only finding a job, but finding housing, finding mentorship, because I don't care what age you're coming out what age you are when you're coming out, you still need that. I see a lot of brothers and sisters coming out with mental issues, and that's something that we need to start addressing. Not only for the formerly incarcerated, but on across the board, because that's an issue that is plaguing minorities, and we're not paying attention to that because of the stigma that we have placed on mental health. So to answer your question, some of the areas that we need to pay attention to is basic necessities that people are going to need when they get out: housing, food, making sure we're taking care of whatever spiritual needs that they have, and mental health.
Man, Cliff, this has been awesome, man. I have learned so much, and I'll just kind of summarize the last valuable nugget you just dropped before we close this out. And I think it's so important that people understand really what you just said. If I can distill it down to this, because God is already God is everywhere. He's omnipresent. He's in the prison. So let's not fool ourselves into thinking we are bringing God or we're bringing Jesus into the prison. He's there. And people are at different places on their journey, whether they are in prison or not. And what I'm hearing from you with all of the prison ministry that may be out there, whether it's King doing it or whether it's another church group doing it, or a different church doing it, or whatever, whoever's doing it, what I'm hearing you say is, let's be mindful and not so full of ourselves and thinking that we're doing more than we think we should be doing, like, because God's already there, right? But meet people where they are. Let's not meet people where we think they are, where we think they should be, or even where we want them to be. Let's assess their needs and meet them where they are, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Because people that have been in your situation, that is one of the best ways that we can serve them, is assess their needs and meet their needs and meet them where they are. I love it, man. Brother, this has been a privilege and an honor for you to be willing to share your story with me, man, and I look forward to learning more about you, and I'm glad to call you a friend and a brother, that we are part of this movement together, because I know as long as we've got brothers like you, man, just pressing us and pushing us forward, we will make a lot of progress. So thanks again for sharing your story, and I look forward to continuing to connect and build with you as we expand Kingdom territory, brother.
Yes, same here. Thank you for having me.
All right, man. You have a good one.
You too.
All right, bro. Peace.
Yeah. I had a dream. I saw black slaves in 2018 pulling the big king with a crown in the middle, looking like tug of war. I guess they forgot the inheritance of the Lord, dying over streets when God gave him the earth. It's all in the Bible, just do your research. White man's religion, that's just fake news. The cross hit Africa for Europe even knew. This ain't black versus white, this is dark versus light. But racism might distract you from the Christ on sight. So here's the Visine, me and my team. Dark world, but we flipping on a high beam. King, K is for the knowledge, I is to inspire. N for the nurture, the G is to grow higher. Jesus lit the match, so we all on fire. You see a crown on the attire, know you looking at a fighter.
My people, my